Our next speaker is John McCabe. He is the Chief Investment Strategist for Shay Asset Management. And I will turn it over to John, who wants to walk around.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to talk a little fast. I normally walk around a room. I do take my coat off. There's an awful lot going on. I wish I was going around again. I don't think I'm as bearish as some of the other people you heard this morning, but I have to ask you a couple of questions, okay? Who's the smarter sex, male or female? It's got to be one or the other. Okay, it's probably female, right? Right, yeah. Let me ask you another question. For every one man that's behind bars, one female that's behind bars, how many men are behind bars? Way more. There you go. That's a nice general answer. Okay, it's 10 to 1. Okay, what percent of all college students are female? 57%. What is it going to be in 15 years? Could be 65%. The only time in history a large nation had more educated females than males. There's a tremendous lot of trends going on around the world that we really want to capitalize. And that's something that we want to talk about a little bit today. I got very lucky. I was the oil analyst at Bankers Trust Company in the early 1970s, and they asked me to go to Washington to try and find out what's going to happen with inflation, what's going to happen with interest rates, what's going to happen with the price of crude. It went from $3 to $10, and so on. And I got involved in a group that was put together by a man by the name of Charles Bartlett. That name may or may not ring a bell with you, but Charlie Bartlett and his wife, they were the couple that introduced JFK to Jacqueline and Martha Bartlett. She was in the wedding party, so was Charlie. She was JFK Jr.'s godmother. And we have our meetings in Georgetown, and that when they put this group together, it was a different Congress. Congress people lived in Georgetown or other parts of the city all year round. The Democrats and the Republicans really came together, and they would have these dinner parties where people would get together and talk about the world around them. So Charlie decided to put this group together, and we would concentrate on 4 Ds. We concentrate on demographics, we concentrate on diplomacy, we concentrate on defense, and we certainly concentrate on demographics, because if you look at those various subjects, they are behavioral sciences to a great extent, and what you're really trying to do is predict human behavior, group behavior, government behavior, corporate behavior around the world. I do some college teaching, and I always start my first lecture by telling the students, let's start off with a syllogism. And they look at you, who the hell's taking philosophy? This is an economics class, you know. But I tell them that economics is a behavioral science, finance is applied economics, and investments is applied finance. So if you know something about economics and finance, you probably will be able to create some wealth and capital for yourself. And that's the purpose of a capitalistic society. Got another question for you, though. 1960. For every one female in Harvard Medical School, there were 14 males. What was it last year? 0.9. So there are trends that aren't being picked up in the media, and there's about 17 of them. We'll do about 5 of them this morning. But what I have to tell you is, if it wasn't for females, there's no way we would be able to have had the 80s and the 90s. It was only 1969 that Yale University opened its doors to females. Do you realize in 1967, females were not permitted in the undergraduate liberal arts library at Yale, at Harvard, and today the president of Harvard University is a female? I mean, why doesn't the media pick this up? I mean, why is our country so great? Our country is so great is because we've got a bucket full of resources and we manage them well. We've got land, we've got labor, we've got capital, we've got management, and we've got technology. We slip from time to time, as we just did with this current credit debacle that we're in right now, and a global type of recession. But normally, we really do bounce back. So let's go through some of these slides together, jump in at any time, and here's what we're trying to say is, if the purpose of a capitalistic society is to create wealth and capital so each generation has a higher living standard, doesn't always work, you know. It's probably not going to work for this generation. Didn't work during the Depression, didn't work during the Civil War. But one thing we do know, we create the most wealth when inflation is under control. So if we can have inflation at 3%, and have our GDP grow between 3 and 3.4%, which it historically has done, that means our living standards double about every 25 years. If we fall now to 2% GDP growth or 1% GDP growth, that's saying our living standards will double anywhere from roughly 35 to 70 years. We certainly don't want that to happen. But just look at 1982 to the present. The Dow hit a low, and that's just one measure of wealth, of 777, a high of 14,164, a gain of 1,700% spread over 25 years. So that's not bad. 5 down years, 21 up years, that's pretty good. But how many remember 1963 to 1981? Another question for you. How many in the audience know what the median age of an American is? Anybody we know if we took half the population is below this age, the other half is above it. What is that? It's 37. So we have an awful lot of young people that never really saw a big recession. You know, the one we're in now is the longest, about 20 months so far, the longest we've had since World War II, that's for sure. But a lot of young people grew up in the greatest period of wealth creation in history. In the decade of the 80s and the 90s, this is a tremendous statistic. The United States created more jobs than Europe created throughout the entire 20th century. Mind-boggling. But when we go from 1963 to 1981, I see some gray hairs, so we're in good shape. What were some of the unfortunate things that happened in that roughly 19-year period where we saw the Dow go from low to high, and it was only 34% spread over 19 years? We didn't create an awful lot of wealth or capital for 19 years. So what are some of the things that happened between 1963 and 1981? Well, one we know was the Arab oil embargo. October of 73 to March of 74, that caused the Dow, the S&P to decline 46%. We had the Iran-Iraq war. We had a president that resigned. We had a 21.5% prime rate. We had a 10% unemployment rate. The long bond was over 14%. You tell that to somebody that's 18 years old, and they look at you. No, that couldn't be. Well, they're below the median age. You tell people like you and I, and maybe our behavior patterns change. So in my group in Washington, what we're really trying to do is look at the change of behavior patterns. In all the years I've been in this group, the most changes in behavior patterns are happening right now. Now, look what happens when we drop the ball. Look at 1929 to 1932. This is when our economy imploded. We saw the Dow go from a high of 381 to a decline of 41, a decline of 89% spread over 4 years. During that same period, real estate from high to low declined 91%. So when your hard assets implode, and your financial assets implode, and your credit markets implode, and your labor markets implode, that's what we have today. So are we going to have deflation? Are we going to have inflation? Or are we going to come out of this thing? One thing we do know, we got the first half of the V there. Cash for clunkers, you know. We're going to look good for the next 2 quarters. We don't really know what's going to happen beyond that, okay? We have to keep an eye on inflation. Can anybody tell me, based on history, what is the true antidote to deflation? It really is inflation, and it's commodity inflation. So does our government want a weak dollar for a short period of time? I would say if you don't do anything, listen to what's going to happen on the 23rd and 24th or the 24th or 25th of September. That's when the G20 nations will be meeting in Pittsburgh for 2 days. Okay, now I got another question for you. How many member nations are there in the UN?